Jim Joyce. I didn't say it in that voice. I got, no, hold on. Let me try it again. Jim Joyce. There we go. Much better.
Like it.
Much
You got to bring your
better.
A game.
I got to bring the A game every Wednesday.
Let's not get a little lazy during summer, kind of August, European months. You're still an American, at heart here. Just stream through August and into September.
And hashtag startup life, right? I don't know when it really stops or et cetera. But yeah, I know we don't talk about deals, but the only one that I saw fly through and just super happy, Jen Schneider, so ex-Livongo for Homeward, right? Raised another 50 mil, announced a big partnership. So congrats to her and the team. I know we're not hearing such, bigger deals these days. So congrats to the team there.
Awesome.
And it's
great to see these projects. I think these projects like, as companies like Livongo, wherever that, these executives go off and do other things and create this kind of diaspora of digital health innovation, right? Transcarent to Homeward. Yep. Awesome. Yeah.
I mean, listen, we still haven't, I don't think we've had Glenn on, to be honest. I think it would be time and maybe even we'll reach out to Jen too. It'd be cool to hear some of their thoughts, but so today, first of all, just last thing, I have to look on YouTube, which t-shirt I wore that last Wednesday, just so I'm not repeating Wednesday to Wednesday. So this was 10 episodes ago, this t-shirt. I think I'm okay.
Right.
I just thought it was funny because I literally looked at it before. So today we're going to have another public company, digital health, public company CEO.
Awesome.
I'm gonna let in. Yes, exactly. I'm going to let Corey in. So Corey McCann, where's the pair behind him?
Oh, he has a big pair.
He's coming, joining in now. There we go. Almost there. There we go. There's the pair. You made it. Good to have you on, Corey. Finally, we were kind of just chatting. I actually didn't realize we didn't have you on because we had you on the DTX podcast. Or I, not you, Jim. I'm cheating on you still on the DTX podcast. No, but welcome. And I don't know all the rules. You guys are two publicly traded company CEOs, so you will push back on me. But I know there's no forward-looking statements and all that good stuff. But
right.
Gonna have
little Reg FD, little Reg FD.
That's you guys, just a little. So if
nice
you haven't
to meet
met
you, Corey.
Okay, you haven't met.
Very nice
I'm
to meet
surprised
you.
through the.
Very nice to meet
you. Well, I have to say before we jump in, not to be flattering here, but you did a presentation at JP Morgan. I don't know, it was early days, way back there. That was kind of the tastemaker, presentation for the whole digital therapeutic space. So ever since then, I remember the presentation was with such clarity. So you've had an effect on a lot of my strategy, whether you meant to or not.
Jim, that's very kind. It's very much a mutual admiration society here. I have to say, as I'm thinking about podcasts, I've always wanted to be on Rogan and maybe Smartless. But then after that, It's you guys and Eugene's DTX podcast. I mean, you're up there. For me.
Right. Fantastic. Love it. And we did say that I kind of have the Rogan haircut, and maybe again, I'm not trying to compare to myself to him, but anyway, for our millions of listeners and users, I just got off another call, but millions of listeners and watchers, members, tell us who you are, and you can start anywhere, personal, professional. Take us through your life a bit, and then we'll interrupt as usual.
Sure. Let's do this superhero origin story style. I'm Corey McCann. I'm the CEO of Pear Therapeutics. Grew up outside of Philadelphia. Was birthed and raised by two community college professors. Went to a Pennsylvania state school thereafter. So I really like American football and canned beer. Those are sort of two of my interests in life.
Awesome.
Took a little bit of a non-traditional course, I think, in the digital health world. So trained as a physician scientist from there. Did a bunch of neuroscience research for people who've seen things like the Brainbow mice, all sorts of cool pictures. Really, really interested in cellular and molecular neuroscience. And then I think if there's a theme in my life, it's do lots of things. Maybe some of them well, maybe some of them not well. So went to McKinsey thereafter, did all healthcare work in their New York office, and then was a venture investor after that. And really started looking at this crazy space of what we called at the time software as a drug, I think is now called digital therapeutics. We were looking at this in 2010, 2011, and then in 2013 started Pear.
Wow. So what are we in now? How many years old is, so 2013 to what are we in? What year are we? We're like, we're a lot of years, 9 years.
Nine years?
We're 9 years in, and I'm very thankful for the beautify my appearance slider on Zoom. If it weren't for that, you'd really be able to see the years.
Awesome.
Now, last time I saw you, Corey, you also had longer hair. So I don't know if you got a filter to do a haircut or something. You know, I certainly don't, but I was jealous. I'm always jealous of your hair, and Jim's too. But
that's incredibly kind, and I can't pass on a hair compliment. So thank you for that. I think that was one of those things during COVID that worked really well in 2D, but not so well in 3D. And so I think as we were transitioning from that 2D Zoom world, it was time for a haircut.
So I want to rewind back a little bit, right? So, you know, trained as a physician scientist, neuro, cell biology. How did you actually transition to McKinsey, right? Like, what was the thinking process there, right? Just always curious how people get into consulting even.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I went to school until I was almost 30. And so the idea of then going and paying to do an MBA just seemed great. I didn't necessarily have an appetite for that. Right. And, you know, I spent a lot of time with MBA students during my MD PhD, and I kind of had a sense for what that looked like. But at the same time, I really felt like I needed some more skills, and I needed a little bit of a credible brand in things that were neither medicine nor science. And so there's sort of a little bit of a joke that says you go out and you get your MCK, and really found the training that I got there to be incredibly formative in my career.
Great. And at that stage, had you spent all of your parents' community college money, or were you off age 30?
Yeah, I was that community college trust money. So.
And then did you fall in love with Boston at that stage, or were you training in Boston, or you're headquartered in Boston?
We're headquartered in Boston, and you know I trained across Washington University in St. Louis and at Harvard in Boston as well. WashU had and still has just this amazing MD PhD program. It's, I think, the biggest, and you know I would still say one of the best that's out there. But it doesn't have the same sort of entrepreneurial spirit that you have in Boston. And so I ended up going to Boston because my thesis mentors, Harvard, as the end of academia, built a whole new center and a whole new building. And so I ended up going to Boston, spending a bunch of time at Harvard. And there's a different spirit here that is really all about company creation. It's not just about knowledge for knowledge, it's about knowledge for impact's sake. And I have to say that really resonated with me.
Right. And when you think about, and I don't know where you wanted to go, Eugene, but the when, like, one of the things that struck me was
Bali.
You know, especially
I want to go to Bali.
I'm going to Bali.
You asked me where I want to go. I mean, I haven't been.
Yeah.
So
sorry, we caught you out of a daydream there. Daydream. Focus.
Oh.
But when just therapeutically, you know, when you're thinking about starting Pear and setting it up, or even you were thinking about the DTX space, I always kind of interesting. Did you have like a thesis of kind of what areas you wanted to go in, or were you thinking about the machine in general? You know, what were the natural areas that you could tackle through software as a medical device?
Yeah, we were probably thinking a little bit more generally at that particular time. And, you know, the origin story is I originally thought that there was a fund level opportunity here. And we went out and we looked at a couple of hundred different assets 10 plus years ago at the time. And it probably still, it wasn't the greatest environment in which to deploy LP capital. It was really early. But I saw a lot of things that convinced me that this could be a fundamental modality. And so, we didn't come in saying we want to build an addiction company. We didn't come in saying we want to build even a CNS company. It was really this thought that software could be a mainstream medical treatment. And I think that's still what drives us. I mean, we've gone very deep into the addiction world, into the CNS world. But, as hyperbolic as it sounds, I believe in a world where there are hundreds of these things and where they treat most medical conditions. The time course and the risk to get there is what we all think, spend our time thinking about. But I think this is a far-reaching opportunity.
And there's lots of discussions around, time to market, right? The pair has existed 9 years, but so has other, in a digital therapeutic space. The choice of going prescription versus non-prescription, right? It's always a challenge. And, if you talk to a lot of the investors today, now when the capital is tightened up as well, we would advise actually to go kind of more direct to consumer, non-prescription first, and then get the data. So curious how you thought about it back then. And again, your commitment to this, a prescription market, right?
Yeah, I flatly reject the notion that it's a choice. I think it's a strategic consideration with regard to focus. And so it really depends on what conditions you want to treat. So, not to pick on you, but I think if we wanted to treat things like male pattern baldness, that might be a better consumer opportunity. I think if, on the other hand, we want to treat opiate use disorder or severe depression, you can't speak to disease treatment without regulatory oversight. You can't get clinicians to utilize your products without clinical data. And so, to me, certainly we can make all the arguments we want that maybe there's some sneaky way to make claims but not make claims. But I don't believe that that's something that persists at scale. And if, again, your goal is to get to scale and to really impact patients and generate a massive economic opportunity, I think regulation is the only way to get there if you want to treat frank medical conditions.
Mm-hmm. And when you're thinking about just from putting your kind of investor hat on, and you've had so much exposure to these different investors, you've been kind of doing this for a while. How are you seeing their perspective change and evolve, mature, and niche right now? Or are you seeing that? Are you seeing this big class of investors getting specialized, or is it still kind of sit in a generalist column for you?
I think it's, I think you're actually seeing some brand value around digital therapeutics. There's been a lot of talk, and I think people know what the term is. When we started out, the term didn't exist. And so, right. That's definitely been an evolution. I think, if you sort of think about like 2021 and prior window, I think you're seeing a lot of interest in digital therapeutics and in prescription digital therapeutics. And I know that a lot of the investors that we educated along the way have gone on to subsequently invest in many of the companies in the space. And I think that's an absolutely awesome thing. I don't think it's necessarily specific to what we do. It's just the way that the world is wired right now. I think anything related to growth has contracted so rapidly that everybody's taken a wait and see approach for the last 6 months. I kind of feel like, running a growth stage company is kind of like running a restaurant in Q1 of 2020. The world has changed. It doesn't have anything to do with you. It's time to adapt to a new set of rules. And that's kind of where we are.
Yeah. I used to use the analogy, I remember I was in Ireland raising money for my last healthcare company. And Ireland went through a total economic collapse at the time, which was, specifically acute in Ireland, across Europe. And, and I was going in raising capital, and I equated it to the equivalent of walking into talking to investors, walking into a Starbucks as it was on fire, and asking for a cup of coffee, that was what I felt like at the investment meetings. Did you not see the fire?
I like it.
and and obviously, I mean, I think, and I agree with all of that been said, and it's interesting to see kind of some of the larger brand names of, venture capital that typically do later stage, kind of more signaling on earlier stage, because if you have a 7 to 10 year view, this too shall pass, right? And it's just the whole kind of B, late A, B, C plus is where the challenges are today, right? And again, I think that's hopefully short lived, but we're going to see, more capital coming earlier.
Yeah, and timing and predicting the market is decidedly above my pay grade. So, my job is to do the best with the hand that I've been dealt. But it's, we're living in crazy times. I think you look at a lot of venture and private investors, and they've focused to public companies to focus on the valuation dislocations there. You look at some of the others, and they've decided to move earlier as opposed to later. I think it's anybody's bet as to what's the right strategy if you're deploying capital right now.
And who do you, I mean, if you don't mind saying, like, who do you admire in the space? Like, do you think that it just is really kind of cracked, or do you think that way? Like, who in the kind of digital therapeutics or even broader digital health category?
Yeah, I think there are a bunch of really young companies that are doing a great job of walk and talking the talk. I think the team at MedRhythms is on to something that's really interesting. I have a great degree of admiration for the team at Akili. I wish them the best, and I think that they have the opportunity to really dramatically change the way that ADHD is treated. I think some of the data that just recently came out of Cognito as a neuroscientist, pretty darn cool. So I think there are a bunch of companies that are really moving the space forward. In the spirit of complete and utter candor here, a bunch of companies that are moving the space backward too. You can't open a press release without some sort of wild claims. And I think the world is confused because, to use an American football term, there are a bunch of parts of the space that have outkicked their coverage. Like we're just, maybe not anyone on this call, but there's some companies that are making some crazy claims on the basis of data that isn't there. And so it's kind of the yin and the yang of digital therapeutics right now.
It's interesting, right? And to your point, right, the more there's funding, the more there's other investors that don't necessarily know the space, but it was hot. And let's rewind back, pre 6 months ago or so. I think it's just, there's always smart money, and then there's just money, right? And so that comes with it. And the interesting part you said earlier, and I want to kind of go back a little bit to it, that we all know what digital therapeutics is. I would argue we're still in our own kind of bubble, I would almost say. And if you ask the patients out there, I don't know if anybody will know what a digital therapeutic actually means, right? And so I think there's the masses, and I'm hoping, a little plug, the DTX podcast. I've had actual patients reach in and say, wow, I just kind of stumbled on it and I've used product X, or I've asked for a prescription, or I asked my doc. So hopefully I think all of us, right, are sort of making that. And at the end of the day, it's not about digital therapeutic. It's just, to your point, Corey, it's a therapeutic, right? It's going to be a prescription product. It's a modality. It's a therapeutic for the right time, for the right patient. So sorry, I got off on that tangent on.
No, I think there's a lot of merit in that thinking. And frankly, I think about this very simply, which is, what is your label? I mean, you're a therapeutic. What does your label say? That's what you are. And, I like the DTA, the Digital Therapeutics Alliance, has done a great job of raising awareness for the space. But frankly, digital therapeutic is not a term of art. It's not something that's written into legislation. There's no definition. And so I spend none of my time trying to define that term, and all of my time trying to orient people toward what my label says, who this might benefit, and what my data says.
As kind of been saying, the trailblazer, right? And especially specifically really laser focused on the prescription digital therapeutic market, right? With indications that you guys are driving, that came with lots of punches, right? I mean, anytime you're doing anything new, you can lose your hair. You guys have done pretty great doing new things without losing your hair. So kudos. But I don't know, any kind of guidance to entrepreneurs or thoughts, like, again, pushing the envelope, doing something new, being punched in the face left and right all the time, hopefully not literally. I don't know. Thoughts, ideas, how to survive?
It's an utterly humbling path. I don't think I'd change a thing, but it's deeply humbling. As I think about the trajectory here, take this however you like, but vision is cheap. It's one thing to have a vision, and I can have all sorts of visions. Like, I have a vision I'm going to bench press 500 pounds, or I have a vision I'm going to hold my breath for 10 minutes. We can have lots of visions. What matters is the execution. And when I think about what's really differentiating for entrepreneurs that I really admire, it's grit, it's speed of turns, and really approaching everything from an 80-20 mindset, and solving as many problems per unit day for as long as you have the blessing to be able to do that, knowing you're going to get some right and getting more right than you get wrong. And it's that sort of probabilistic humbling that, is what it takes here.
Awesome. And
Jim, we don't do many clips.
Like,
sorry, just real
right.
quick. We don't do many clips of our show. I think you've done one or something just by accident.
Right.
But I think we're going to have to clip this one.
Yeah, this is gonna be that's major unproduction there. That's major unproduction. Yeah, no, I like it. I love that. I love it. I took inspiration from there, reflecting on my own career there. went deep in my own recess.
We'll fix it in post. It's cool. Yeah, it's fine.
I'm not gonna live up to all the things you said there, but I'll do my best. But if you were to, I know vision's cheap, but if you were to look forward, and you were to think about, for the class, not just for Pear, what do you think we're facing in 4 or 5 years? And Eugene's doing the 600 episode of Digital Therapeutics. What's your forecast of how the class looks?
Yeah, I believe, and I continue to believe, that there will be software to treat most diseases. I think in the 5 to 10 year time horizon, you're going to see these products starting to move away from behavioral therapies, which is just by virtue of risk where you start, and getting into drug software combinations and digital biomarkers. It's what every digital health entrepreneur says, but at some point we'll talk about these things as therapeutics, not digital therapeutics.
Right.
I think we're headed there. I think the space is in an interesting place where, if you think about risk in terms of an hourglass, there was a lot of risk and it was very distributed a couple of years ago. And I think now we're right at the waist of the hourglass where the risk is around reimbursement. And I think everybody is trying to figure out how long payers will deny care because they can, in the face of data that shows that patients benefit. And if you look at other spaces, other medical devices, this happens in every single medical device in the US. I can speak much less articulately outside the US, but it's just the game. And I think figuring out exactly what that payer adoption process looks like, how long it takes, we can look at comps, but everything sort of takes its own shape. That's what we're all trying to figure out.
Right. So 5 years from now, that's solved, that people are evaluating these things, you think?
For sure. For sure. And well, obviously I think I've got problems if they're not. But I think we're in a place where there are standard reimbursement and benefit categories. We're going down them. We're having standardized conversations about data, and we're not having to go through a digital process and a medical process and a pharmacy process at every given payer. And we're not having to have everyone hire a different consultant to define digital therapeutics at every given payer. There are definitions, and we're working through them.
Awesome. It's interesting. I just heard an exec talk about in a health plan talk about that they've discovered in dozens, and I don't want to disturb, but in dozens of frameworks to figure out and kind of certify / move through the internal processes. And this is kind of scoped through from the world in dozens of frameworks, right? And you would think that that also needs to be aligned across. And the difference between, well, there's a one standard for FDA and there is a different standard within health plans and the payers, right? And then there's a huge 10% up to 10% difference of what needs to be shown and delivered and proved. And so it's yeah, I mean, lots to do for the, I think, the digital therapeutic entrepreneurs, right? Because it's almost like you're being put to even a tougher standard that even a molecular because you have access to real world data versus the drugs really that lags, right?
And Eugene, I think this is just fundamental to running a medical device company. You know, medical devices are put to different standards than drugs. You know, thanks to groups like pharma in the US, there's a lobby, there are statutes, there are definitions. You either are a drug or you aren't. And if you are a drug, once you're approved, that puts you into a reimbursement chute. That's not the way it works for medical devices, and PDTs are medical devices. So I think that's the battle that we're fighting right now.
So, I mean, so many more questions on one, but I have one. Both of you guys are public company CEOs. How do you keep yourself like sane? I don't know. I mean, I guess
there's a big assumption there. There's a big assumption there that you started off.
Yeah, that's also true. That's also true. I guess I always say everybody's crazy and weird. We're just all different levels of it, right? That's kind of my comment, right? I'm asking for a friend, Corey. I'm asking for a friend.
Jim, I feel like I'm not adequately engaging the crowd here. How do you do it? I'm looking to learn.
Oh yeah, well, I don't know. You know, I mean, I was hoping to get it out of you this call.
Oh, I see what you.
I was looking for that,
but
I, yeah, no, you know, for me, it's interesting. I mean, we're listed on Euronext. It's you know, I had kind of a thesis in listing our company. I think the pressure you might be under in a U.S. listing environment could be different. So Euronext it's a you know, European exchange. It's big, but you know, we're on a junior market. So you report twice a year, and there's some history of earlier stage companies, like I was almost like pre-commercial traction companies, you know, going and listing like in Sweden and you know, markets like Australia and Norway, and so that was my thesis. That was my thesis coming in, that I would, you know, be given. It might just be, you know, it's the old, you know, don't judge a fish by how it climbs trees. So that was my thesis. Now I do find that they do try to judge me by how I climb trees sometimes. So I think the biggest advice that I've gotten that I'm trying to just hold is that it's is you know, just like you're doing when you're building a company, just try to build a compelling big company, compartmentalize the financing part of the arm, compartmentalizing the finance, and not become a prisoner to it is my theory, you know, and then just try to stay true to that, you know. And I have this great admiration, like I think these guys, that these big company guys that like are these, you know, all these entrepreneurs that we admire, like the Jobs and the Musks and the Bezos. It kind of feels like they did that, right? Like they kind of, you know, famously Jobs telling people to, you know, hey, well, if you don't want to own my stock, then don't own it, you know, like, and I'm not quite in that luxurious position, but the, but I think that's kind of the thesis, you know, if at the end of the day, if you build a big, beautiful company that has lots of impact to people, you know, hopefully ultimately that wins. So that's my theory anyway.
I mean, it certainly resonates. I am a believer that the fundamentals are fundamental. And, you know, I think if what you're trying to do is optimize for the market week on week or month on month, you're going to drive yourself crazy. And worse than that, you're going to drive your team absolutely crazy. And so, you know, I think it's our job to really have the world's most articulate sense for what is your company's true north, and take in all the data as you go, but really keep people focused on that true north. And, you know, I find that if we're not sort of thinking about 2 to 5 year problems, I'm probably thinking about the wrong things.
So maybe Corey, just that, you know, Jim brought up Jobs and, you know, Apple, and I know I asked you that. I believe I asked you that on the DTX podcast. But for those who did not listen to that, unfortunately for them, what was the naming thinking on Pear? Were you like, and I know the answer because I did ask you, but just for our the shot listeners.
Yeah. Hey, I think you can play this one of two ways. I think if you want to really be brash, we aim to be the most successful tech company ever named after a fruit, and Apple be damned. I think if you want to be a little bit more niche, I continue to believe that drug software combinations like what we've built with Reset-O are going to be a huge part of digital therapeutics. And so it's a cheeky pun on pairing drugs and software.
Cool.
But Jim
I was
Joyce.
hoping for more of an audience response there, but
yeah, no, I mean, look,
you can
we can keep going. You know what? For Jim, our job for the next one, even though we're going to have a different guest, is to come up for other combinations of how Pear was built as a brand. How about that, Corey? I'll take that as a to-do.
That's great. Yeah, I would settle for some canned applause. That's
yeah. I'm afraid, like I've been, with the Zoom delay or whatever it is, and then the pear is a healthy fruit, so we give you that. That's fantastic. All right,
Mr. Joyce, do you want to go to your famous question?
Okay, so Corey, if you take yourself back in time here, or take yourself forward in time, and you've pioneered, this fantastical space of digital therapeutics, and now it's just therapeutics, and people are getting all the benefits from these products that you've helped bring to the market. But you're at a Pennsylvania college basketball game, you get a Michelob Light in your hands. You just visited some old community college family members, and you're walking across the parking lot, and this young aspiring physician, scientist turned consultant entrepreneur looks up at you and says, Corey, you're Corey. And you're looking at him as if he's a younger version of yourself. I've just started this phenomenal digital healthcare company. And, what's your one piece of advice you give me as I initiate?
I mean, first of all, that's an awesome view of the world, and I love just for a moment escaping my day and just living in that reality. So it's awesome just to hear you talk about it. It made me feel really good. One of my favorite quotes is from Mike Tyson, which is, everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the mouth. And I firmly believe that's sort of critical for entrepreneurship and for success. I would advise that they're going to be really high highs and really low lows. And this is, again, all about getting more right than you get wrong, and doing it as quickly and cheaply and efficiently as you possibly can. And again, focus on that 2 to 5 year vision.
Love it. Never
Awesome.
had anybody use a Mike Tyson's quote in over 100 episodes. So I'll clap for that one too.
As they say. There you go.
All right. Well, Corey, thanks for making the time as a busy CEO, and we had a pleasure of having you here. And to all the viewers and listeners, subscribe, pass it on, and hopefully learn something.
Thank you, guys. It's been awesome.